Ik ben Michiel van Vught en welkom bij Je Geld en of Je Leven. De podcast die jou helpt betere keuzes te maken ten aanzien van je geld en je leven. Mijn doel? 10 miljoen mensen inspireren hetzelfde te doen. En jij kunt meehelpen door deze podcast 5 sterren te geven bij Apple, Google en Spotify. Leuk dat je luistert. Deze podcast is overigens mede mogelijk gemaakt door NNK Vermogensbeheer. Ik ga over naar het Engels, because I have a English-speaking guest, and running from me is Carl Richards. Carl, great to have you on the show.
Excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your time. You said good morning. It's good afternoon where I am at. So where are you recording now?
Park City, Utah. So the mountains of Utah. Yeah.
Ah, great. Well, beautiful there. Well, you're a CFP. People actually might know you as the sketch guy. You wrote a column for the sketch guy column for years. You're featured on Oprah, in Forbes, and also you've written 2 books. I have those books here with me. The Behavior Gap and the One-Page Financial Plan. I'll definitely recommend everyone to read those. It's very impressive stuff. So great to have you here and talk about your, basically what you believe in when it comes down to financial planning and stuff. Do you mind going a little bit back in time and tell us a bit how it all started with the sketches?
Yeah. I mean, I'll try and give you the quick version. So I was a financial advisor, financial planner, and I was sitting at my desk. I have no art background, as sort of should be obvious when you look at my work. I was not a doodler in school. I'd never done this before. And I was sitting in a meeting, and I think most of your audience will understand this feeling. Despite trying to be, I really believe that we need to use really simpler language, right? And I've always believed that, and I thought I was pretty good at it. So get rid of the jargon, use simple language. Most people don't know, what standard deviation is, and they certainly don't know, if you try to fix it by saying, volatility, so I've always believed that. So despite believing that and trying to use really simple language, I had this familiar experience, which again, I'm pretty sure many in your audience will relate to. I was sitting in a meeting with clients. I remember who it was actually. And they were super smart, successful people. And I was trying to explain a concept that I thought was important for them to understand in order to make the decision that we were trying to make. And I was just, excuse me, and I was just getting blank stares back. And I would try again and more blank stares. And I started to realize this was my fault. I mean, these are smart, successful people. It wasn't them, it was me. So in an act of really desperation, I did something I'd never done before, which there was a whiteboard in the office that I used to use. It was a shared office, so it wasn't my whiteboard. I remember I stood up and I drew something on the board, and as I recall, it was something as simple as a square with some arrows. And I think I was trying to illustrate accumulation and then decumulation. So it's sort of the money's going to go in here for years, and then when it's time, the money's going to come out of here. And I just drew squares and arrows and maybe a circle. And I remember distinctly the feeling in the room when they said oh, we get it now. Yeah. Despite the fact that this was I'd never done this before. So I remember that feeling and thinking, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if I could repeat that. And so I did it in the next client meeting. I just, with my yellow pad, just legal pad, just drew something. And then I remember doing it at lunch on a napkin. And one thing led to another. And then the next important part was one time, and I noticed clients always wanted to take it with them.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which was fascinating. They were like, can I take that? And I was like, well, I'll redraw it nicely. And they're no, I want that one. They wanted a souvenir of the experience that they had. And so the next big event was, I did that with a client and their spouse wasn't there. And they got home and half a day later, they called and said, hey, that thing you drew on the whiteboard, would you mind drawing on a piece of paper? And this was back, they were like, and would you scan it and email it to us? And I was like, yeah. I was like, sure, whatever. So I drew it, scanned it. And when I emailed it to them, I remember seeing it digitally and thinking, oh, I could email this to other people. And there was no big like grand plan. It was just
No.
like, oh, I can email this to other people. And that's what led to putting it up on I created a little website called the Behavior Gap, and I started putting it up on the website. And then, you fast forward a little bit, it was 2 or 3 years of me putting it up on the website, and only my mom and my sister noticed, and then you fast forward a little bit, and I actually got an email from the editor at the New York Times saying, "Hey, I love these. Would you do them for
Oh,
us?"
wow.
And that's how that started. And then that just expanded to the books and everything else. But really, at its core was this realization that if you can make it simple enough that I can draw it, clients will understand it.
Yeah. And in your opinion, why is it so important that clients actually understand what you're explaining them?
Yeah. So I don't I think that it varies by the type of client, to be honest. But clients actually may not need to understand technical concepts if they know that you know and know that you care. And so if in my example for this is, and so this is a little bit different than what I just said, I think clients need to understand enough to get to the point where they don't need to understand anymore. And sometimes in our stereotypical, like to be stereotypical, like sometimes like our engineer clients may want to always understand.
Mhm.
But the comparison I like to use is, when you go to the doctor, you often leave, at least in the United States, you leave with a prescription. And, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you couldn't even read it. It was like just chicken scratch on a piece of
Yeah.
paper. Then you would go fill the prescription and you would just take the medicine. You wouldn't get a second opinion. You wouldn't research the medicine. But the only reason you would do that is if you felt thoroughly diagnosed.
Right.
If you didn't feel thoroughly diagnosed, you would definitely get a second opinion. And so if we can be really good about thoroughly diagnosing, allowing clients to really be heard, asking really good questions and listening really carefully, it may be, and most of my clients didn't, they didn't know the intricacies of the investment process we used. They just were like, oh, we trust Carl. He knows about our family. We've cried in his office, like that kind of thing. So if the client feels thoroughly diagnosed, which is a whole, we could spend 2 hours talking about that. If the client feels thoroughly diagnosed, understanding the intricacies isn't that important, but still understanding the concepts of what we're doing, clearly. And financial planning is one of those things that what people think it is because of what they've seen on the financial pornography networks. What
Yeah.
people think it is completely different than what it actually is.
What is it, financial planning then? Can you explain that in your opinion?
Yeah,
What is it?
to me, it's the never-ending process of aligning, and I'm just in my head, for those of you who are just listening, like I'm drawing in my head, like it's a Venn diagram. It's the never-ending process of aligning your use of capital. So in one circle would be use of capital, and there would be an asterisk by capital, and below that asterisk would say time, money, energy, and attention. So time, money, energy, and attention. That's the 4 forms of capital I think you have. So it's one circle. So what is financial planning? One circle is your use of capital, and the other circle is
Yep.
what's important to you. And we want to get those circles overlapping. Like if we
Yeah.
can align, and so the way I would say that now without drawing it would be financial planning is the never-ending process of aligning your use of capital with what's important to you.
That sounds fair to me. It sounds so
Yeah.
easy then.
Yeah, it's so interesting that both of those very like aligning your use of capital and what's important to you, both of those are lifelong pursuits. Like I thought like the what's important to you part was easy. I was like, oh, you just ask clients like what's important. And it turns out we don't know. As humans, we don't know. That's a never-ending process. Like you think that, retiring and getting on a sailboat is important to you, and then you're like, well, have you ever been on a sailboat? You're like, no, I haven't ever. Well, so it's a never-ending
Yeah.
process. So both of those, it sounds simple, most things that sound simple and right, are actually quite complicated to sort of get to. It turns out being simple or elegantly simple is quite hard.
Yeah, especially when life overcomes you, of course. You know, you can't basically look into the future, so stuff happens and then everything changes probably in the capital
Yeah,
circle, but also what's important to you.
yeah. I mean, I think it's really, really important for us to realize, and I think we have this problem worldwide. I mean, I've spent lots of time over where you are. I've spent lots of time talking to financial planners in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, and all over Europe, and all over the US and Canada. And we all have this real kind of false sense of precision. Like we really, like we're at risk, I think, of becoming sellers of certainty.
All
And
right.
the reason we want to sell certainty is because certainty is really easy to sell, because every human wants it, but it's impossible to deliver. And so I think once we understand and commit to the idea that that's the never ending process part, that just about the time you get the plan perfect, in air quotes, something changes. And as soon as we realized like that, actually, I remember being frustrated with that at first. Like, no, just stick with the plan, just stick with the plan. As soon as we realize it's the changes that are actually where we're most valuable,
Yeah.
financial planning is not about being precisely correct today. It's about being a little less wrong tomorrow. And if we start with that default framing that, this isn't physics, you know,
Yeah, it's not. It's not like you wrote a beautiful, or not probably beautiful, but a very interesting, I think it's a blog post, which says market forecasting isn't like the weather. You're describing looking out of the window at your Utah mountains, and you describe how the weather forecasting definitely got better last decades. However, forecasting of the stock market still the same. It's bullshit. Can be done.
yeah,
And we still
yeah.
look into this sort of holy grail. Where is it? How can I forecast this economic stuff, which can't, but we're looking for it. And it's false certainty probably we're looking for.
Yeah, and look, I have deep empathy for that. Like we desperately want to know. We're making incredibly important decisions right now, and there's a whole industry willing to sell us the idea that they have certainty about, they have the information we need to make this incredibly important decision. But it turns out those are just a never-ending wrong. Like
Yeah.
it sounds really beautiful. It's wrapped up perfectly in suits and ties and offices in London and offices in New York. It's wrapped up beautifully, but and I think you see this with both the financial advice, like the financial pornography networks, but you also see it creep into real financial planners just because we want it so bad. Like we're
Yeah.
looking people in the eyes and we're saying, hey, I got you. But what we have really, what people need is the truth. And the truth is we're dealing with irreducible uncertainty. And I think instead of having the skill being like, I've got the biggest spreadsheet and the best forecasts, the skill should be, I'm really good at navigating reality, which essentially means like, hey, I don't know what's over the next mountain, but I got all these tools in my backpack. Like I'm really good at helping you make decisions in the face of irreducible uncertainty, because I've done everything I can to get rid of the reducible uncertainty.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
done
Yeah.
everything there, but there's still this pile here. This pile is called reality, and I'm going to help you navigate it. Like that's the feeling we should have, so that we can say, look, I've done this 1,000 times before, and what we've like, and then we move, and new information shows up. So that's the less wrong part. The default should be, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Let's make the best decision we can, see what shows up, and let's get a little less wrong. And so it's really like this narrowing in over time versus this perfect line that we draw in our financial plans.
Is it look? I'm looking at this, one of your sketches in the background, which is the the line, and then they start like a sort of I don't know, it's just a ball of all like scratching.
Yarn, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're going back to probably it's outcome or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I
You
mean
never.
that those of you who are seeing the video, that image in the background is just a sort of a demonstrate. Sometimes we get confused. One of the reasons I think financial planners, even the best ones, still use really complex language is we feel like if we're too simple, people won't need us. I mean, I've been warned that my career is going to end because I'm too simple for like 20 years. And I thought it sounded kind of exciting to go to this scary land called Too Simple, and see what I could find. And so I went there, and people kept warning me about the monsters, and I got there and I was like, it's fine. And I think that's a fundamental misconception of what we're pointing to when we use the word simple. So simplistic is what I think we're scared of. And that's, all the people in our industry, and there's a lot of them, that should be selling shoes instead of being financial planners.
Yeah.
But most of your audience, what happens is you go through the reps, right? You've seen the nuance and the edge cases. You've studied, you've read, you know how to actually calculate an amortization table in your calculator. Like you've built the spreadsheets, you've done all the stuff. And what happens is you come out the other side of that. And the other side of that is called elegantly simple. And Oliver Wendell Holmes said that he wouldn't give a fig. He wouldn't give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but he'd give his right arm for the simplicity on the other side.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm pointing to when I'm saying to your audience, like, please be more simple. I'm saying that the people don't need, you don't need to use it as a selling tool. You don't need it to impress people. What people are really impressed by is when you can take this really complex topic with all the nuance and say, Michael, based on everything you've told me and everything I know, this is the thing that matters, right? Like that's what they want. They just want you to take them there.
It's probably a lot of still self-doubt, I would say, in a lot of people are in the profession. You're not good enough if you can make it simple enough.
Yeah, and I look, deep empathy for that. Like, look, we're relatively new at this, this financial planning thing as a profession. We're the whole industry, everybody else is super complex and uses complexity as a selling. I mean, most of us were taught, if you were taught anything about selling, you were taught to use complexity to, like, you would dig a pit, throw the client into the pit, and then look down and say, I'm the only one with a rope.
Yeah.
But nobody likes being treated that way. So I have deep empathy with that feeling, along with the certainty feeling. But I think as a profession, we're going to be stuck in this like hamster wheel until we realize that actually what we thought our value was, which was like drawing this beautiful 30-year line on a piece of paper, called a financial plan. We thought that was our value. It turns out our value actually is more, instead of being a defender of that outdated map, because we know your financial plan is wrong the second you hit print, or save. We just don't know how. So rather than being a defender of that outdated map, our real value is being a guide in a never-ending, always changing landscape. So instead of a defender of an outdated map, we're a guide in a changing landscape. It's actually a better job. It's more based in reality, and it's a little scary. It's scary, right? Because sometimes it's easier just to rely on that old myth that we know what's going to happen, but we don't.
So anyway, you also have to admit that you are wrong. You're going to be wrong for sure. However, you're going to do everything in your power to guide your clients to their desired outcome, I would say. But it's probably, I think it's a change of mind.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem. I actually started using with clients, and I've been using it for 15 years, like telling them, hey, the only thing I know for sure about this financial plan is it's wrong. So I don't have a problem using that language, but you don't have to. What you can say is, this represents our best, most educated forecast of the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And we know the future won't turn out exactly like this. So we're going to be ever diligent watching. And please know this will change. Like, that's different language than I'm wrong, but it's the same thing. Like, look, this is our best estimate of what the future will look like. And like every model, we know it's incorrect. We know it won't look just like this. So when you change your goals, or when the market changes, or when you don't inherit that money, or when you do inherit that money, like there's going to be positive changes and negative changes, but there will be changes, and we're going to be here with you every step of the way, so that when those changes show up, we can make the best decision. Like, that's the language you could use with clients, but it's much different than, really sort of sticking to this idea that we've got a forecast about the future.
And if you look into this in the way you're explaining it, the last couple of months is really going really fast with the AI and artificial intelligence, right? So Chat GPT and all stuff like that. If you look into the profession of the financial planner as being a guide, is it, in your opinion, still a very human profession instead of the technical stuff which can be done by a computer these days? Is also the sort of the way we can have to move forward in order to stay relevant?
Yeah, I'm not at all nervous about AI, and even beyond, artificial general intelligence, which we're not quite close to yet. But I'm not nervous about either one of those, because, maybe this is a good example. Like, you're not going to have any time, we're not anywhere near the idea yet of AI that's programmed to win the chess game, let's say, saying, instead of the next move in chess, saying, I don't want to play, or I would prefer to play checkers. The only place we've seen that in the history of the world is, and this is remarkable really if you understand it, and I've been diving deep into this, it's like remarkable that the only place you've seen that ability really is evolution and humans. Like, humans are the only ones that can say, I actually don't even want to do that. Like, we can break all the rules, like the predictive models that said you should have done this, everything we've ever created, like the airplane we broke a rule, a rule of physics, like, so I still think that and I'm using chat quite a bit in my work, and I'm excited that it's getting better and better and better. And it doesn't make me nervous at all to even tell clients, like, hey, I use this tool to get us to the spot where we now can be creative. What do you want to do? Like a good AI financial planner is always going to tell you, right, that why would you pay off debt if your interest rate is 3% and I can get you 6 or 7%, or even 4%? Or your interest rate is 3.5%. My interest rate on my home is 3.5%. Well, the equity markets have averaged between 8, let's just call it 8. There's never going to be a spreadsheet that tells me that I should pay off my debt. But Michael, I've been to mortgage payoff parties. You know what I mean? Like, I've never been to a rational portfolio party. True. Right? But I've been to mortgage payoff. So there's something about it that says, yeah, I know the spreadsheet says that, but I love the feeling of paying off my debt. Okay, right? Same thing with education, same thing with retirement. How many people do I know, I've had so many conversations where people have been like, I don't care at all about my retirement unless my kids go to the best school I can make possible. And that's you often see that with first generation immigrants to the United States. We'll say that a lot. Like, I don't even care. And then you'll see the next set of clients who come in will say, I paid my way through medical school. I don't care. Like, my kids are going to earn their own.
Yeah.
So in 2 hours, one client is saying, I don't care at all about retirement. If my kid can get into Stanford, I'm paying for it. I know this doesn't resonate exactly in.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next hour, somebody has a completely flip-flop, same circumstances in terms of balance sheet, completely different answers. So I actually don't think we should be worried about it. I think we should be leaning into it as a tool to get rid of all the things that leave us with the one single thing that's really important. And that is, man, we've got incomplete information here. How do we be creative about the solution?
Yeah. You were talking about AI as being a tool, and you were mentioning tools earlier when you were explaining you don't know what's behind the mountain, but we have a lot of a set of tools in our backpack, to help our clients, whatever circumstance or whatever happens behind, on the other side of the mountain. What would you say is the most important tool in your experience, your personal experience, even we can use as financial professionals to help our clients and guide them towards their goals?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like all the technical tools are, and sometimes I get accused of downplaying the technical tools, and I don't mean to do that. I just mean they're table stakes at this point. Like you have to know how to use the calculator and the spreadsheet. I think the most important tool now is the ability to ask really good questions and listen, right? Discovery. I think being able to give somebody a spot, and I know, like I heard this, we lived in London for a year and I've spent plenty of time over there, and I know there's this like version of like the arms folded, rational European who's like, I'm not going to cry in your office. Like there's no feelings around money in Europe. I don't buy it at all. Right. Like we're all humans, and so I think the ability to get a little deeper, if I was going to train one ability, like, and by the way, I'm seeing models where you may not have to have the technical expertise. Like you can partner with somebody who has the technical expertise. But I think the one thing that somebody's got to have increasingly is the ability to have really great conversations about money and uncover why. Why are you doing this in the first place? And that may have not, it wasn't quite as important a generation ago. And
that changed.
Yeah, I think now increasingly I'm almost having daily emails now from people in the 45 to 55-year-old cohort saying, is this all there is? Right? Like, why am I doing this? Like, and those are questions like my dad's generation didn't ask. I mean, some of them did, but not as many. Now we're saying, and I think COVID gave us this permission to say, like, where do I want to live?
Yeah.
Do I want to work at home? Do I want to be home when the kids get home? Do I want to, like, we're asking more questions. So I think the one skill, the one tool that's most important right now is asking really good questions and learning to listen, which turns out is actually really, really hard.
I know. We probably need more women in our profession because in general, I think probably generalization, they are better in listening. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons we need more women in our profession, and that's one of them. And my favorite reason is because we need more, the voices that have tried to solve this problem haven't done a great job, right? Like we can't keep going with the same voices all the time and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And so I love as many diverse voices as we can get because we get new perspectives. Like I listen to my friend Anna, who comes from Puerto Rican and Gambian. So she's a female financial planner with a background from Puerto Rico and Gambia. Now, the stories she tells about money are completely different than the stories I tell.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I learned so much from her because of those stories. And it's changed the way I relate to money in a way that hadn't changed in 25 years by listening to myself talk. So I think there's lots of reasons. And I think one of them, you point something out that, like, look, often I have my experience, especially dealing with, I noticed it happened more often with my female clients than male clients, where they would say like, wait, when I show them the financial plan, they'd be like, wait, you think you know what the next 30 years of my life is going to look like? Right. And so there's this sense of like empathy and listening and openness that I think there's a lot to learn from.
Yeah. Good point, man. All right. Wrapping up, I think, because we're already recording over half an hour. You've been at our event, like before the recording started. We talked about it. It's over a decade ago. You've been in into this profession for decades, you definitely changed, I think, the profession in the Western world, to be sure, for sure, with your sketches and the way you create this simple one-page financial plan and philosophy and stuff. What is your biggest or the biggest takeaway you want to give our listeners, that this is try this, start with this, or please don't do this, anything at all?
Yeah. So the first is like, please, please, please understand the value of the work you do. Like I feel like we have had for years a professional self-esteem issue, because nobody really understands what we do. And like your father-in-law doesn't even know what you do. And
Sure.
sometimes that means you can feel confused about what you do and what you see in the press and what you see in the news. And then nobody understands what you do. And then the thing they think you do, like that shows up on the financial pornography network, like buy, sell, right? And there's plenty of people saying that you're not needed, that thing is not needed, right? Like, why would you ever hire a financial advisor? You can just do this.
True.
But what they're pointing at is not what you do, right? And so number one, please understand the value of what you really do, which is help people align their use of capital with what's really important to them. The value of that has never been greater. I honestly, because the whole world feels more uncertain. I don't know if it is actually more uncertain, but the news and the spread of news makes it feel more uncertain. The people out there, pointing out my window, the people out there need you more than ever. And if that's true, they need you more than ever, but they don't know you exist.
Yeah.
Then this is the second thing that I would just beg you to do. Like, please, 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 just start telling the stories more frequently. Like, play in traffic a bit. Do your work a little more publicly, right? Write a column for your local hometown newspaper. Start a blog, start a podcast, and tell the stories. Don't talk about the forecasts or the how to buy life insurance, or like talk instead about the story. Like, why did you help a client buy life insurance? Tell the story, tell the stories more frequently, because we need those stories out so people can say, it should be self-obvious at the end of a story, like, hey, I want that. Right? So we don't talk about what financial planning actually is. We show them what it is, so that they can say, like, I don't have that. Well, what is that called? That's actually, turns out that's called real financial planning, right? So those are the two things I'd leave you with.
Well, thanks a lot, Carl. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for being on the show. I will definitely put all your links in the show notes, so people subscribe for your newsletter. You send a newsletter every week, I think.
Yeah, the Behavior Up newsletter, but the best place for your audience is to go to the societyofadvice.com.
The societyofadvice.com.
That's where all my work for financial planners is.
All right, I'll drop it in the show notes. Again, thanks a lot for your time. Have a great day. We're closing up on our evening already. Thanks again, and hope to talk to you soon again in the future.
Yeah, cheers, Michael. Thank you, and thanks for the work you're doing. And it's time that I get back over to that event. Like, it's been a decade.
Oh, yeah, right. So you're always welcome.
Okay, cheers.
I'll contact you
later.
See ya.